It's a mock draft Monday, and PFF has the Bucs taking an edge rusher I wasn't high on early in the process, but I'll tell you why Keldric Faulk to the Bucs might work out over the long term.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into today's episode of Locked On Bucs. I am your host, James Yarcho, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. It is a mock draft Monday. I will be dropping another mock where we have an interesting stipulation that relates to what we discussed on Friday, as well as answering some draft-inspired mailbag questions. That is all coming up in a little bit. Going to kick today's show off with a mock draft from Bradley Locker of Pro Football Focus, where he has the Bucs taking Auburn edge rusher Keldric Faulk at 15, saying, quote, Faulk has been a polarizing player throughout the pre-draft evaluation cycle, but he's still only 20 and a high-level run defender, having secured at least an 83.4 PFF run defense grade in both 2024 and 2025. Tampa Bay continues to need consistent playmakers along its defensive front seven, and Todd Bowles could take a swing at a developmental piece in Faulk. The former Tiger feels like a player who can hear his name called earlier than anticipated, end quote. This is a relatively popular pick among Bucs fans, and Faulk certainly has the measurables that you're looking for. 6'6", 275, a 35-inch vertical. He ran a 4.67 40 at Auburn's Pro Day with a 1.68 second 10-yard split. Now, I have expressed concerns about Faulk at 15. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I mentioned him as a guy that I would not draft at 15 if I was the Buccaneers on one of the recent Bucs squad shows. However, while I don't think that he could make a huge impact in his rookie season as a pass rusher, I am starting to shift my mindset a little bit on the idea of taking him, and here's why. If Faulk doesn't become an instant impact edge rusher, that's going to be okay, because the Bucs did go out and sign Al-Quadin Muhammad, who can come in on those sure pass situations, while Faulk can gain some experience there if he's on the field first and second down, but he will be a much more reliable run defender than Muhammad is. And that is what the Bucs are going to need in order to get Muhammad onto the field on those third downs and help end opposing teams' drives. Lance Zierlein of NFL.com has Faulk projected to become a quote-unquote good starter within 2 years, and his NFL comp is Carlos Dunlap. If Faulk can become Dunlap, then I would say that that's a win. I don't love the sack totals, only 10 sacks since 2023 while playing for Auburn, but the disruption that he created for Auburn does go a little beyond the stat sheet. That said, my other concern is that he won't translate to a pure stand-up edge rusher, which, in my opinion, is what the Bucs are kind of looking for. However, his versatility is something the Bowles might find intriguing. He is someone that can line up on the outside, but can also put his hand in the dirt next to Vita Vea, opposite of Kalijah Kancey. Now, of course, the Bucs also signed A'Shawn Robinson to replace Logan Hall. This would give the defense a little bit of flexibility should Kancey miss time with an injury. We're hoping that doesn't happen yet again, but history shows that it probably will. You can now move Faulk into that spot and continue the rotation with Diaby, Nelson, Walker, and Muhammad. Now, I don't love the idea of that being the extent of the Bucs edge rushers this season, but we're still kind of in a wait-and-see mode with David Walker. We know that the Bucs are extremely high on him. Jason and Todd talked about him extensively during the scouting combine when they met with us privately, when they were at the podium, but that does not necessarily mean he's going to translate to the NFL the way they hope. High hopes, high expectations don't always result in high production. You could, however, look at Walker as kind of a bonus draft pick for this year. The Bucs took him last year, but this is the first time that he's going to get to see the field. So Light and Bowles might be taking that into consideration when going through their big board and making decisions as to who they want to take in the first. Someone like Faulk, who has the potential to become a solid pass rusher and is already arguably the best run-stopping edge rusher in the class, could be a player that really intrigues them for what he can do now, as well as what he can do in the coming years. And I know what you're all thinking. The Bucs haven't been able to develop a solid edge rusher in years, so why would this year be any different if they take Keldric Faulk? Well, the honest answer is it might not be. But you can't stop taking swings just because you've missed in the past. If that was the case, the Bucs would never draft another first-round quarterback again, since they've missed on every quarterback that they've drafted since Doug Williams, who left the organization and then went on to be a Super Bowl MVP. The other thing that might intrigue Light when it comes to Faulk is that he fits the I am that man mold. Faulk is constantly talked about as having a very high character, being a fantastic leader in the locker room and on the field, and has been called a culture player by multiple analysts, referring to a guy that you want to continue to, build around and help build a winning culture within your franchise. And it's only fair, if we're going to talk about Mesidor's age, then we have to talk about Faulk's. If it's a detriment to Mesidor, then it's a positive for Faulk. He's only 20 years old. He won't turn 21 until after the NFL season already begins. So there is a lot of room for that development as well as growth. I feel like Mesidor, who you all know is one of my guys and someone I would love for the Bucs to draft, I feel like he might already be close to his ceiling while having a pretty safe floor. I think Faulk has a safe floor, but his ceiling is much higher than Mesidor's could be, considering where he is in his development, in his experience, and at his age. He has a bag of pass rush tools that he can go to, but they do need some development. They do need some work in order to make him successful at the NFL level. It is encouraging that he's not a one-trick pony at this stage. He's not strictly a bull rush guy. He's not strictly a speed guy. He has some moves. They just need some refinement. So it is safe to say that I have softened on my stance of not wanting Faulk to be the picks for the Bucs. I do see some serious potential there. My concern has always been needing someone to get to the quarterback at a high level while Faulk may not be that guy in 2026, they do have Al-Quadin Muhammad that they can look to in order to make those plays, while Faulk is still able to have an impact in other areas of the defense as a rookie. That's the big wild card in all of this. How is Muhammad going to translate to the Buccaneers, and what is David Walker as far as an edge rusher? If you're confident in those two's ability to get to the quarterback, then drafting Faulk as an elite run-stopping guy that can also get to the quarterback on occasion might be the move for the Bucs in the short term as well as the long term. Jumping into a mock draft of my own with the stipulation that's going to make me twitch while doing it. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar that you deserve, while you get real-time notifications as you go on about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing that your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. If you've ever hired someone who looks good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. If you're hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's Sponsored Jobs puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates. And they boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role, and that makes the real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with less stress, less time, more results using Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with me and other listeners of the show. Coming up for the draft, we will have an all-access member virtual draft party with me. We're going to have a lot of fun there. You can click the link in the show notes or go to lockedonbucs.supercast.com. All right, if you go back to Friday's episode, I went on a bit of a rant, a bit of a tangent, a little soapbox moment about Kenyon Sadiq once again, thanks to a report from Justin Reed of ESPN, who said that according to those who know, Sadiq is a very real option for the Bucs at 15. So let's see how a draft pans out for the Bucs if we were to take Sadiq at pick 15. So I passed on a lot of trades. There were a couple of tackles that fell to me at 15. I had, I think, 3 or 4 different offers. Passed on all of them, as well as Keldric Faulk and Akeem Mesidor in order to take Kenyon Sadiq at 15. So then in the second round, I'm looking at Brandon Cisse, the corner out of South Carolina, Lee Hunter, the defensive lineman from Texas Tech, Gabe Akis, the edge from Illinois, one of Evan's my guys, Malachi Lawrence, Cassius Howell is still there, Anthony Hill Jr. is still there. So I'm a little torn as to whether or not I pass on some of these edge rushers in order to secure Hill and get myself a starting caliber linebacker, or do I go ahead and get the edge rusher that I know can be an impact guy? To me, the most glaring need is still inside linebacker. So I have to roll with Anthony Hill Jr. out of Texas here. He is the last of a tier that I would trust to step in and start on day one, with the next best guys being Jake Golday and Josiah Trotter. I'm going to go with Hill, see what happens at edge rusher a little bit later. Third round, I don't know how this happened, but our Mason Thomas is still sitting there. I am a big fan of his. He is one of my guys, and this is what's wacky about the draft this year. Maybe one of these edge rushers that we've talked about as a second rounder, our Mason Thomas, Gabe Akis, guys like that, they could end up falling to the third round, and the Bucs can make a move to get them. This is actually turning out pretty well for me. Jake Golday went the pick before to the Pittsburgh Steelers, so prioritizing linebacker in the second round was the right move, because the next best linebacker on the board is Kyle Lewis. He is ranked 122nd overall. That's a huge reach here in the third, so good call on Anthony Hill, and then we get our Mason Thomas at pick 77 in the third. Now in the fourth, I see another one of these guys that I really like along the defensive line. I do not love the cornerback selection here. You have Chandler Rivers out of Duke, Charlie Demmings out of Stephen F. Austin. Kyle Lewis is still here. I'm not taking him. Defensive lineman Caleb Proctor out of Southeastern Louisiana is a guy that we talked about recently on the show. He is an absolute monster out of a smaller school. He can rush the quarterback. He can stop the run. Extremely high upside. I'm going to take him in the fourth round. Then a couple of options here in the fifth. J.C. Davis, the offensive tackle from Illinois. Jake Slaughter, the center from Florida. Jordan Hudson, the wide receiver from SMU. Roman Hemby, he was a guy that Evan mentioned last week during his mock draft, the running back out of Indiana. And I think at this stage, I'm just going with the best player available. So I am going to take J.C. Davis from Illinois. 6'5", 335 pounds, finished as the third best left tackle in college football last season. He was the 8th best in 2023. He had a horrendous year in 2024. It appears that would be the outlier. Every one of his snaps in 2020. Well, I mean, honestly, every one of his snaps over the last 3 years have come at left tackle. I do not love the tackle depth on this team. I know the Bucs just brought back Justin School after a 1-year hiatus in Minnesota, but I still think that you can upgrade there. Maybe you can get Davis cross-trained to fill in at right tackle in addition to left tackle and give yourself a little bit more flexibility with your depth. But he, to me, was the best player on the board. He typically is not sitting there for the Bucs in the 5th round. I'm going to go ahead and take advantage of that situation. Round 6, now we're at the point where we're looking for upside. We're looking for potential special teams help. We have Jalen Husky, the safety from Maryland, TJ Hall, the corner from Iowa, Billy Schrauth, the guard from Notre Dame here. That can help with the interior offensive line depth. I could go back-to-back offensive line picks here. But I think the smart move, the most effective use of my draft capital is to take TJ Hall, the cornerback out of Iowa. He's not great. If he was, he wouldn't still be around in the 6th, but he does have the tools that you're looking for. He has decent size. He has shown improvement year after year after year with Iowa, including the passer rating when targeted has gone down each and every year since he has been at Iowa. So we know that he puts in the work. He strives to improve his game. That is something, that's a mentality that you want to bring into the locker room. As a rookie, he can provide help on special teams. He can continue to develop to be a depth piece at corner. Now, he played almost exclusively on the outside. He had fewer than 20 snaps at the slot corner position over the course of the last 3 seasons. The Bucs need some depth on the outside, so I'm going to go ahead and take the flyer on Hall, the corner out of Iowa. And then in the 7th round, I'm just looking for best player available. I want somebody that has the opportunity to help as a rookie. So I'm taking Alabama running back Jamarian Miller. He is explosive. He's quick. He's actually a really impressive pass blocker in this class compared to some of the other running backs. Only 10 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons, just under 4.5 yards per carry over that same span. But this is a guy that could work his way into the kick return conversation. I don't love the idea of going into the season with just 3 running backs. You have Bucky, you have Kenneth Gainwell, you have Sean Tucker. Even if Miller starts off on the practice squad, and of course there were a couple of practice squad running backs that the Bucs called up and sent back down a couple of times last season, I do think that Miller has the opportunity to have enough of a special teams impact to be on the 53-man roster and then provide a little bit more depth in case something happens to Bucky or Gainwell or Tucker. You have a guy there that you know you can give the ball to, but can also pick up those blitzes and protect Baker Mayfield as a solid pass blocking running back. So this mock draft ends up with tight end Kenyon Sadiq, linebacker Anthony Hill Jr., edge rusher R. Mason Thomas, defensive tackle Caleb Proctor, offensive tackle J.C. Davis, cornerback TJ Hall, and running back Jamarian Miller. As far as mocks go, with the Bucs taking tight end in the 1st round, this probably worked out as well as you could possibly hope. I don't love settling for corner in the 6th round. I would be shocked if R. Mason Thomas was there for the Bucs in the 3rd round. But all in all, if this ended up being the draft class, if the Bucs say, you know what, we love what Sadiq can add to this offense. We want to run a lot of 12 personnel. We want to have Otten out there. We want to have Sadiq out there. We need to develop Sadiq's pass blocking, but he's such a weapon in the pass game, especially in the red zone, especially in the end zone with his athleticism, his size. We feel that he is going to help this team the most based on who's available at 15. If this was the rest of the way the class ended up, I wouldn't be too upset. I still wouldn't be thrilled. I still wouldn't love the idea of taking a tight end at 15 after you just re-signed Cade Otton and gave him that money, but I could get behind it. I could see the path for guys like Anthony Hill Jr. and R. Mason Thomas to be impact rookies, and then hope that you can develop Hall while also providing, offensive line depth and then a rotational defensive lineman that can really, really boost the play of that line in any situation. Couple of draft-related mailbag questions. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. Right now, the defending champion Oklahoma City Thunder are the favorites to win the championship at plus 115, followed by the San Antonio Spurs at plus 500, the Boston Celtics at plus 600, the Denver Nuggets at plus 1100, and then the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 1300. I don't know about you, but my money is on the Boston Celtics. They've been on absolute fire since Jason Tatum returned from his ruptured Achilles, and just worth noting, it's been a really, really long time since the defending NBA champs got out of the second round of the playoffs. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and I had a couple of solid draft questions from Jared. They rolled in, and since we're already on the topic of Sadiq, we're going to start with this one. Quote, tight end is a need for us, and do you think Devin Culp should be in consideration as a pass-catching tight end since Mike is no longer here? Jared, a great first question. I agree, tight end is a need, but to me, it's not a pressing need. Not to the level of linebacker or edge rusher or corner or even defensive line. I think the Bucs would be completely fine if they ignore tight end altogether in this draft, but I could also understand taking one. You can upgrade over Payne Durham and over Devin Culp. I don't think either one of them are better than Otten in any facet of the game, whether that's blocking, pass catching, route running. I don't see it. So, that, of course, that is why the Bucs brought back Cade Otten in general. It's because he is the best all-around tight end on this roster. With that said, you can get by in this offense with the tight ends that you have if you don't draft one this year. That's why I don't care for the idea of drafting Sadiq. Again, phenomenal athlete. A potentially explosive playmaker. I can see the reasoning. I can somewhat justify the pick depending on how the rest of the draft goes, but I don't believe it's the overall best use of resources. To your other point, I also don't think that Devin Culp's playing time is going to increase at all just because of Mike Evans' departure. If anything, I think that Culp is on the chopping block. If the Bucs end up using a high pick on a tight end, whether that's Sadiq in the first, if it's Stowers on day 2, that would give the Bucs 5 tight ends when you include whoever the rookie is, as well as Koki. Culp may be phased out altogether. He could wind up back on the practice squad, but to me, he's the one in the most danger of losing his roster spot if the Bucs do end up addressing tight end in the draft. I think they could. I don't know if they necessarily should, but I can understand why they would. Jared's other question was, considering the recent depth acquisitions, do you see a trade coming where they might give up draft capital to get a player that they favor? This is a great question. I do think that is very much in the cards, but it depends on the player and the situation. If they see a guy like Sonny Styles starting to slip, if he somehow gets past the New York Giants at 5, and you can work something out to move up to 6, to jump the Washington Commanders and secure who very well could be a guy that we mentioned 15 years from now in the same breath as Derek Brooks and Levante David, then you go make that move. you go get that guy, which is why the Bucs are still signing some free agents. They may not be flashy names, but they're filling out the roster as best they can so that they can maximize their draft capital. I could see them being willing to part with a day 2 pick, probably a pick in 2027 to jump up and get him. It's the same with David Bailey, who started to slide in some of these mock drafts, though I still think he's going to wind up being a top 5 pick. One name that I am going to throw out, because I am starting to see the questions, the reports, when, as far as the first round is concerned, is Ruben Bain. I do not think that the Bucs would take that swing if Bain starts to slide, considering some of the unfortunate news that came out about him over the weekend, where, for those that don't know, he has been linked to a 2024 car crash that resulted in someone slipping into a coma and then passing away due to injuries sustained in the accident. That is going to be a red flag for a lot of these teams, especially a team like the Bucs, who really put an emphasis on character. To be fair, I want to be fair to Bain. We don't know the details of the incident, so there is every chance that it could have been literally just an accident with an absolutely heartbreaking and tragic outcome. But we could start to see Bain slide in these mocks and then in the actual draft, depending on what comes of the investigation. There are a lot of teams that are already doing their own investigation into what happened to see what they are going to do as it pertains to Bain and his draft stock. Beyond the first round, though, I could definitely see Licht trying to make some moves in order to go get his guys. Something that I think would be ideal is if you are able to trade back in the first round and acquire some capital, then you could take a player like Faulk, Mesidor, Howell late in the first, and then you turn around and use the capital that you receive in a trade down to go up in the second round and get Rodriguez in that early portion of day 2 if he starts to slip that far. Now, we are starting to see Rodriguez's stock climb into the latter third of the first round in some of these mock drafts, so it may be a complete pipe dream to think that the Bucs can get him at all in the second round. But if you're willing to part with some capital, again, maybe it's a pick this year and a pick next year, could just be draft capital next year. But if you can go up with the Jets, Cardinals, Titans, or Raiders in the beginning part of the second round, then I think Rodriguez is going to be a player that is worth spending that capital. I mean, you go back to the mock that we just did on this show. I would rather skip out on Caleb Proctor or J.C. Davis in order to secure Jacob Rodriguez. It would take your 4th and an additional pick. Again, could be this year, could be a day 2 pick next year, in order to make that jump to the 33 to 36 range. Based on, I'm going strictly based off of the trade value chart. The 3rd round pick for the Bucs is too valuable. So if you use that, you're likely going to get a 4th round pick in return. So it would end up being your 2nd and 3rd for a 2nd and a 4th. I'm not sure that the Bucs would want to sacrifice that 3rd rounder, even if they are getting a early pick in the 4th back that could potentially be a top 100 pick. To me, that dip is going to be pretty gigantic, and Jason Licht may value pick 77 too much in order to make that trade. But again, you have to ask yourself, is Rodriguez as a player worth that kind of move? If the Bucs go offense in the first round, I don't know that they can afford to sacrifice the 3rd round pick. If you go with edge rusher at 15, corner at 15, I could see you I could see a situation where Jason gets really aggressive to secure their guy at the top of day 2. They may decide that they're comfortable with edge rush as it is, with Walker coming back, the addition of Muhammad, and that linebacker trumps the desire to add to the edge rush if it means getting a player of Rodriguez's caliber. So then you take Sadiq at 15, you throw edge rusher out the window, you move up to get Jacob Rodriguez. That is a scenario that we could see play out. Now, Licht hasn't made a trade in the draft since 2023, and he hasn't made a move to go up in the first round since 2020. For reference, he moved up from 60 to 57 in 2022, cost him a 6th rounder. Then he made a move to go from 50 to 48 in 2023, cost him a 6th rounder. Going from 44 to 33, 34, 35, it's going to cost more than a 6th rounder. But maybe Jason can work some of his magic, get out of it with just a day 3 pick this year. If they see a chance to go get Rodriguez, or maybe somebody who slipped out of the first that we didn't expect, somebody like Keldric Faulk or CJ Allen or Cassius Howe. All in all, it's been a while since Jason has made a move in the draft, but he certainly wasn't shy about, talking about that possibility with us at the combine, whether it's a move up or more likely a move down. He's moved up in the first round once in order to get Tristan Wirfs. Other than that, he's moved back or stayed put in the first 3 trades to move back in the first. That resulted in Vernon Hargreaves, Vita Vea, and Logan Hall. That is going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs, Instagram and TikTok at Locked On Bucs in both of those places. Join the Everydayer Club and the All Access tier. You can click the link in the show notes or go to lockedonbucs.supercast.com. Subscribe on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to support the show, but you don't want to join the Everydayer Club, it's real simple. Like this episode on YouTube, leave a 5-star review wherever you get podcasts. It does help other Buccaneers fans find the show. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.